We're going to be making a delicious sandwich bread recipe. It is so simple and so easy. You don't need any kind of appliances. You don't need a stand mixer. You don't need a bread machine. All you need are the ingredients, a big bowl to mix it up in, and an oven to bake it in. So let's go over the ingredients you will need to make this bread. You're going to need 1 1/3 cup of warm milk, and I warmed this in the microwave. You're going to want 1/4 cup of oil, 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt, 2 1/4 teaspoons of active dry yeast or instant yeast, and 1/4 cup of white sugar. And here we have 3 cups of bread flour. So the first thing we're going to do, and I'm using this big clear bowl so you can see everything. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in our warm milk into our bowl. Then we're going to add in our sugar. And then we're going to pour in our yeast. And we're just going to give that a little mix. And we're going to let this sit for about 3 to 4 minutes to let the yeast get really activated. And you want to make sure that your milk is not warmer than 110 degrees. It can be anywhere from 100 to 110 degrees. And the warmth just helps to activate the yeast, and the sugar also helps to activate the yeast. So just put everything in the bowl and then wait for things to start to get a little foamy. So now that our yeast is nice and frothy, and this is what they call blooming your yeast, we are going to move on to the next step. So I'm just going to stir that up a little bit. We are going to pour in the rest of our what we call our wet ingredients, our oil, and we're going to go ahead and put in our salt. And now we're going to add our flour. And this is 3 cups of bread flour. And we're just going to slowly add this in and stir it up. And this is going to be a thick dough. And I like to use this, but you can just use your hands. This is called a dough whisk, and you can find a link to one on my Amazon shop page in the description box below. But you can definitely just use your hands if you don't have one of these. We are just going to mix this around until it is pretty much incorporated. See how it looks kind of shaggy? Now we're just going to take this off of the dough whisk. And I'm going to go in with my hands. And we're just going to kind of squeeze the dough together. Just taking and squeezing the dough, making sure I get all of that off of the bottom. Now, it's a shaggy ball of dough. And to make things easier on ourselves, what we're going to do is we're just going to let this sit here for about 10 minutes. Now this step, if you want to learn some new words, or you may already know this, when you just let it sit, when you mix it together roughly and let it sit, that's called autolyze. So that gives the flour time to absorb the liquids and become more pliable. So we're just going to let it sit here for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back to the next step. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes, give or take a little bit, and our dough has what we call autolyzed. And here I have a bowl of warm water. Now what we're going to do now is we're not going to knead the dough, but we are going to do a little stretching to it. And I'm just going to use this water to wet my hand. And if the dough seems dry, you can add a little, just sprinkle a little water. But I'm just going to take it and I'm just going to stretch it. Just going to stretch the dough. And then I'm going to pull it over on itself. Just stretch it. And and of course it's not going to have a lot of elasticity right now. But we're just going to, and you could call this kneading, but we're just going to do it right in the bowl. We're just going to pull it over on itself and stretch it. And this helps to develop the gluten. Now if you like to knead dough, you can definitely put you a little flour on your countertop and start kneading your dough. And if your hands get a little sticky, you can put them in the water. You don't want a dry dough. That's why I'm not using flour, because I don't want to make this dough super dry. I would rather use water instead of flour, because I don't want to get a really dry dough, because then my bread will be dry and crumbly. So I'm just kind of, as you can see, I'm just kind of pulling it out and then back toward myself, turning the bowl, and just doing that. And you really don't have to do it that many times. Okay? So now I'm going to sprinkle the top with water really good, because I don't want this to dry out. I'm just kind of shaping it into a little ball, and I've got it dampened really well. And now I'm just going to cover the top of my bowl with some plastic wrap, just to prevent it from drying out. Now I'm going to come back in about anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes, and then we will stretch the dough again. And I'm just going to let it sit right here on my counter. So you can tell the dough is starting to rise. You can see it starting to rise, and we're just going to go in. I'm just going to wet my fingers so that I don't stick too bad, and I'm just going to stretch it. Look how much more stretch we have now. So I'm going to shape it into a rectangle, or any shape at all, and just stretch it out and fold it in on itself. And I'm going to do that about 4 times. And this literally takes the place of kneading. Now if you were in a hurry and you didn't want to wait all these 20-minute waits in between each stretch and fold, you could just knead this dough on the counter for about 10 minutes if you wanted to do the kneading. But we're literally just kind of stretching it out. Just stretch it out a little bit, and then pull an edge and fold it in on itself. There's really no wrong way to do this. And if you would rather use flour, like if you just can't stand that dough sticking to your fingers, you can. I don't mind, and I would just use water. But you can tell each time, you can tell the dough has so much more gluten development because it literally stretches now. Now if you want to check, you can, and if you think you need to do one more stretch and fold, then you can. So you hear them talk about the window pane test. So you just basically, you pick up a piece of dough and you stretch it, and if you can see light through it before it breaks, then they say that you're good to go. Now it is going to break eventually, but if you can start to see through it before it breaks, and I can this. So now what we're going to do is I am going to get some oil. First I'm going to wash my hands. So I'm going to take some oil and I'm going to sprinkle kind of in my bowl and on top of my dough ball. You put some on my hands too, because this dough is really sticky, but that's how I want it. Okay, and I'm just going to rub that oil all over the top of my dough ball. Okay, and kind of get it shaped back into a ball. Okay, and roll it around there in the pan. Now I am going to, so it's covered really good with oil, I'm going to cover it once again with my plastic wrap. This time I'm going to make sure it's covered good because I don't want it to dry out in the warm oven. So just make sure that is pressed down there. Now we are going to put this in our oven with the light on, which has brought some warmth into the oven, and we are going to let it rise for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. Probably about 30 minutes it should double in size. You don't want to let it rise too much at this point because there is another rise coming. So we're just going to put this in there and let it rise for about 30 minutes, and it should double in size. And I'm actually going to set myself a timer so I can check it in 30 minutes just in case I get distracted. Okay, so it's been just a little over 30 minutes and our dough has definitely doubled in size. And now it's time to shape it and put it in our bread pan. And I have here a bread pan that is 9 inches long and 5 inches wide, and it's probably about 3 inches deep. So that's the pan that I'm going to be using. Now you're going to want a little bit of flour for this, and you're going to want a clean surface. Excuse me, you're going to want a clean surface. So I'm going to sprinkle a little flour here on my counter and dump my dough ball out. This aside. Okay. Flour in my hands. Now, oh, it is so soft and like a big airy cloud. And I'm just taking my fingers and I'm just pressing out. I guess you would call this degassing. Hey, and if you wanted, for the thrill of it, before you took it out of the bowl, you know, you could just do that fist punch and call it punching down the dough. That's basically what we're doing. And what I want to do is I want to kind of shape it into a rectangle, and I want the rectangle to be as wide as my pan. So I'm just going to keep and it can be more narrow at the top, but the bottom of it needs to be as wide as my pan. And I'm going to shape it into a loaf. Okay. And if you see any big air bubbles, you're going to want to get those out because those will be holes in your bread. So definitely pop any big air bubbles that you see. And that is about as wide as my loaf pan. So just going to stretch it out a little bit. Now I'm going to start down here, and all I'm going to do is just pull it toward me and roll it. Just kind of pull and roll. And then I'm going to tuck those edges in. And I oiled my pan. This is a non-stick pan, but I just oiled it a little bit. Now, you want a nice tight top on your bread so you get a good rise. But it does not have to be perfect. You're still gonna have a beautiful loaf of bread. So now we're gonna lay this in our pan and just kind of press it down. Okay. Try to get it even. That'll help your bread come out even. Okay. Now we are going to put this in our oven with the light on so that it can rise. And what I want to do is I want to leave it in the oven to rise until it rises just a little bit above my pan. So that's going to be about double. Then we will be ready to bake it. Okay, it's been about 40 minutes and I think our bread is ready. It has risen up beautifully. I could have tucked it a little more, but that's okay. It's still going to be beautiful, delicious bread. And I've got my oven preheating to 375, and when that gets up to temperature, then I'm going to put it in the oven and bake it about 30 minutes. All ovens are different, so it could take a little bit longer, probably not less, but we're going to bake it until it gets done, and then we'll bring it out and see what it looks like. It has been 30 minutes, and we are ready to get our bread out of the oven. And it looks wonderful. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this melted butter I have here and brush the top, and that'll just help it to be very soft, plus give that added butter flavor. Now I'm going to let this cool in the bread pan for a few minutes, and then I'll put it out on my cooling rack. Okay, it's only been just a couple of minutes, and I want to go ahead and take our bread out of the pan. Make sure it's not stuck. Oh, it's so lovely. Just look at this beautiful, beautiful. This beautiful loaf of bread. Okay, now that's the hard part. We have to let it cool before we slice into it. So we'll be right back to slice it up. So I'm having some audio problems, but here I am getting ready to slice into the bread, and I am explaining about the knife that I'm using. You want to use a serrated knife when you slice into your bread. You don't want to use a flat-edged knife because that'll mash your bread, and you want to let the knife do the work. So don't press really hard, just kind of let the knife do the work. And also you want to hold the knife level with the bread. This helps you get a nice even slice and it not be thick on one side and thin on the other. So let's slice into this bread and see what it looks like on the inside. And it looks really good, like it has a really nice crumb. And there you can see it has a beautiful crumb. It's very soft and delicious.